Hi guys! I am really sad that we are not meeting in person this week. I really wanted to have the time to sit down with you and talk about the beauty and the joy that comes from creating your own story. And if we were meeting in person, I was going to go ahead and read you a story that had been written by a former student, and so I'm still going to do that. I want you to not have the idea that you are too old for story time. Story time should be fun. So get yourself in a comfortable position, get a cozy blanket if you're chilled or something. I have my cup here of my licorice root tea, and there's not going to be any fancy images. There's not going to be any fancy booms or sound effects. It's just you and me and this story. And after I read the story, I'm going to be asking you some questions on Slack about it, because I want you to evaluate it using the tools that you have now. What are the parts of the story? So you're going to tell me where you think the climax is. Does the story follow those 7 guidelines that we talked about last week that great writers do? Are there round characters? Is there interesting detail? But first, I just want you to relax, close your eyes if you want, and hear the story of Houdini and Pickpocket. This story is called Houdini and Pickpocket, The Quest for a Cracker, Escape, and a Strange Creature. This is one of the adventures of Houdini and Pickpocket, 2 salamanders, during their stay at the Big's house with the Big family. For those readers who are not in acquaintance with the Big's family, it is in truth the music family. And they are named the Bigs because to a salamander or salamanders, humans are big. Also, John, Mark, and Hannah from the story are real brother and sister. Hannah used to have a pair of star-spotted black salamanders named Houdini and Pickpocket, the inspiration for this adventure. John Mark, Hannah's older brother, in sad truth, does indeed like to flush disembodied bugs down toilets. And so the story begins. Outside was rainy and cold and gloomy on the day of Houdini and Pickpocket's big adventure. Inside the Big's house and sitting on a shelf was a large glass tank. Lights shone from the top of the tank, and branches, leaves, dirt, and bowls of water were placed so that the inside of their cage looked just like the forest. Houdini and Pickpocket were brothers taken from the forest when they were babies, then growing up. I'm not sure what happened right there. Then growing up, Houdini was napping on a leaf and Pickpocket paced on his feet, thinking. Pickpocket was hungry. So hungry, in fact, he thought he might even eat a fly. And believe me, that was a point of desperation. You see, unlike other salamanders, Pickpocket hated eating flies. He had only eaten 1 fly before, and the results were a bad aftertaste and the most embarrassing case of gas. It wasn't that there wasn't enough food. Their blue food dish was always full of lettuce or dead crickets. The thing that was about Pickpocket was he was so picky about all his food. He longed for a few licks of cream, or even better, crackers. Crunchy, golden, buttery crackers. His mouth watered at the thought. The only problem was, his scrumptious crackers were in a box, in a cabinet, in the kitchen, a long way away from Houdini and Pickpocket's tank. Still, Pickpocket was determined to get his crackers now. He could already taste the buttery crunch. He would get his crackers, and he knew just the guy to get him there. "Oh, Houdini!" Houdini groaned and flipped over on his slick tummy, hoping that the lettuce leaf he was sleeping on might muffle Pickpocket's sweet voice. Pick only used his sweet voice when he wanted something. "Go away! I'm trying to sleep!" Pickpocket didn't. At first he tried raising his voice. When that didn't work, Pick shook Houdini's shoulders. And when that failed, started to jump on Houdini's back, yelling at the top of his voice, "Houdini, you numbskull, get up!" "Ouch! I'm up! Houdini rubbed the sleep from his eyes and yawned. "What? Make it quick!" Thanks to a certain someone who drank a certain something and then stayed up all night yodeling, I didn't get any sleep. Houdini glared pointedly at Pickpocket. "Oh, come on, Deanie! The can was just sitting there!" Pick pointed an accusing finger out the glass. "How was I to know it was caffeine? Anyway, it's Hannah's fault." Pick folded his arms and held his chin high, frowning in disapproval. "She should know not to leave such temptation near young, naive salamanders such as ourselves." "Ha! Young and naive? 1. You knew perfectly well it had caffeine, and 2, Houdini leaned closer and whispered mockingly, "She doesn't know we can get out of the tank." Pickpocket shrugged the words off. "That's not the point," he said impatiently. "The point is, it's time for a snack." Houdini rolled his eyes. "And let me guess, you need a guide to show you how to get to the kitchen?" "Well, yes." Pickpocket looked sheepish. While he could hide when there was no place to hide, and slither about as if made of air, he was terrible with maps. This was why, every time Pickpocket wanted to venture farther than a room or two beyond their tank, Houdini had to accompany him. Houdini guessed it was for the better anyway. Who would get Pickpocket out of trouble if he wasn't there? With a sigh, he slithered up the glass and pushed his head on the lid till the lid lifted. The salamanders slipped through as quietly as a whisper. Sneaking through the house was easy for Houdini and Pickpocket. Because they were so small, they could travel any way they wanted, whether via floor, ceiling, animal, or big. They chose to travel under the floorboards and arrived in the kitchen from under a gray ceramic tile in the floor. Pickpocket spotted his prize, the vast oak cabinet above the sink. Inside the cabinet, Pickpocket weaved between many colored cardboard boxes. Mac and cheese, raw spaghetti noodles, brownie mixes, and then in the middle, a bright red box of golden crackers. Pick nimbly slid open the flaps and dove inside, ready to swim in the glorious sea of yummy crackers. Thump! A muffled "ook" came from the box. Houdini scrambled up and peered inside. Instead of a glorious sea of crackers, a single, stale, but still golden cracker sat alone at the bottom of the box, now accompanied by a black salamander standing stiff as a board on his head. Pickpocket fell over with a thud, then scurried and hugged the lone cracker. "The last cracker! Mine! Mine!" Pickpocket twirled and spun, holding out his cracker before him like a ballroom dancer. At the top of the box, Houdini smiled a bit. This could be amusing after all. La 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 la! Below, Pickpocket serenaded to his cracker a waltz tune, then took a little bite. For a moment his eyes closed and he savored the crumb. Then Pickpocket smiled beatifically. It was like a tidbit of heaven. La la la! Pickpocket and his cracker stumbled and crashed in a heap against the far wall. The box tilted, now weightless, being almost empty. It tipped a little farther, and then down it fell. Pickpocket was still inside with his cracker, Houdini fallen with the box, screaming. Down, down, down it fell, landing on its side with a metallic thunk in the sink. Out of the red box spilled Pickpocket, his cracker, and Houdini. "Whoa!" Pickpocket yelled as he spun round and round down the slope towards the gaping drain, Houdini close behind. Swish! With a final turn, Pickpocket stopped right before tipping over into the edge of the pit. Unfortunately, his momentum sent the cracker flying out of his hands and a graceful arc into the chasm. "No!" Pickpocket screamed as he crawled to the edge of the abyss. His screams echoed. "No! My cracker!" Houdini carefully stood and brushed off his star-spotted skin and shook his head to get rid of the double pickpockets. One was enough, thank you. He slithered over and patted Pickpocket's back sympathetically. Pickpocket was starting to look a tad teary. "Don't worry, Pick. I'm sure he's, it's all right. Don't cry. Don't cry." Too late. Big, fat tears rolled down Pickpocket's smooth cheeks and dropped down the hole, echoing when they splashed. Now Houdini was starting to feel guilty. He was the older salamander, if only by a few days, and should have realized the incredible danger of an empty cracker box and a love-blind salamander. "Look, I'm sure we can get it back somehow. Just let me think a minute." Pickpocket leaped up, tears gone and a huge grin on his face. "You can get it? You can get my cracker back? Whoopee!" Pickpocket did flips backwards over the chasm. "Well, I'm not sure. But if you could get that junk drawer open, then I'll see what I can do. The Bigs always have some kind of useful junk lying about," Houdini said, as he pointed at a small drawer to the left of the sink. "No promises, though. I've never tried this before," cautioned Houdini. Pick loved crackers so much, and Houdini loved to try any new feat when the opportunity presented itself. With a few twists of his tail, Pickpocket had the lock on the drawer unlocked and the drawer pushed open. Houdini rifled through its contents and picked up a few items as he went. When he was done, he carried these items to the edge of the chasm. A paperclip, a small pack of matches, a spool of dental floss, and a green pushpin. Pickpocket leaned closer and gazed at the items as if they were diamond-studded crackers, and he waited for Houdini to do his magic. Houdini started to twist the paperclip into the shape of two hooks pointing opposite each other, with a small loop in the middle of the wire. Taking the loose thread of dental floss, Houdini threaded it through the loop in the wire and knotted it firmly. He grabbed the floss and swung it above his head faster and faster. Cowboy style, he threw it out upwards towards the metal nozzle above them. Missed. He tried again, and this time it looped around the metal bar, and when Houdini tugged, it held tight. "Nothing is as strong as dental floss, Pickpocket," he said to Pick with a grin. Houdini tossed the spool of thread down the chasm, grabbed a tight hold of the floss, and instructed Pickpocket to climb on his back and to hold on tight. Houdini took a breath and stepped into thin air. Right before he disappeared over the edge, he reached out with one hand and grabbed the pushpin, firmly biting down on it so as to not let it slip. Who knows what creatures had found refuge down there? He tossed the pack of matches to Pickpocket, who snatched it before it could drop and be lost. "Now, Pick," he mumbled, trying to talk around the pushpin without dropping it. "Light a match and hold it high." Pickpocket did so, and the chasm's slimy walls were illuminated. "Oh, this is so exciting!" squealed Pickpocket once, but the rest of the down was silent. Houdini was repelling quickly, but the wet walls made it difficult, and he slipped a few times. He knew the Bigs had gone out for the day. Hannah, their Big, had told them that morning while she was getting ready to leave. He hoped they wouldn't get back soon. The possibility of them turning on the water unawares, or Hannah finding their tank empty, was both probable and dangerous. He descended faster. It seemed an eternity before they reached the bottom, and Pickpocket had to light a new match from the pack because the first had burned down to his fingertips. Finally, though, the end of the climb came. The pipe was wet and icky, and to their disappointment, not a cracker was in sight. They trudged onward horizontally now, Pickpocket avidly searching every nook and cranny for his cracker. The stench grew worse as they waited, changing from rotting food to sewage. The splashing of their feet echoed. In little gusts of cold air, the light of their match danced. After a while, the main pipe branched off, then again, until they were in a tubing maze. Houdini was getting really nervous. What if they were going too far? What if they got lost down here? Maybe we should go back. Houdini tried not to let his voice reveal his nervousness. It wouldn't do to worry Pick too. Pick swung his head around. "Why? You know how to get back, don't you? You never get lost. Let's keep going. We didn't find my cracker yet." Pick sludged on determinedly. Houdini hesitated and then followed. He had never gotten lost, it was true. Then again, he had never gone in search of a stale cracker in the catacombs of a plumbing system either. Swish! Gurgle, gurgle, blub, blub, bubble, blub, gargle. "What was that? Did you fart again, Houdini? I told you not to eat that onion. I told you it looked weird. I said onions aren't red and shiny. But did you listen? No? Well, next time maybe we'll..." Rumble, whoosh. Pick stopped and huddled closer to Houdini. That noise was definitely not Houdini. Houdini remembered where he had heard that gurgling before. The toilet. "Run!" Houdini screamed, taking Pick by the hand, half running, half dragging him toward the next bend in the pipe. Along the pipe's relatively smooth walls here and there, erosion had crumbled and worn the tubing. But was there anywhere to hide? Yes, A few feet ahead, in the wavering light of their match, Houdini could see a hole worn in the pipe with dirt peeking out. Water rumbled forth above their heads. Any second it would fill their pipe and sweep Pickpocket and Houdini off to their deaths. Louder, louder, louder the pipe trembled, and Pickpocket and Houdini were knocked off their slippery feet. A few more seconds till they might drown, a few more inches to the hole. With a leap, Pick and Houdini slipped into the hole, squishing their bodies in the wet mud as far away from the mouth of the hole as possible. They were just in time. Whoosh! Rivers of sewage water rolled forth, drowning out all speech, all thought. Bzz. Bzz. Pickpocket opened one tightly shut eye. What was that noise in the tunnel? It didn't sound frightening. He opened the other eye. Blackness. The water was no longer thundering, but lapping lightly. Houdini! Houdini! Are you there? Cried out Pickpocket. Mumbled Houdini from the corner. He spat out a mouthful of dirt. Here! Where'd the light go? It's pitch black in here. Well, duh, said Pickpocket, rolling his eyes in the dark. You think that they install lighting for salamanders on quests for crackers in the plumbing? The match must have fallen into the water when we were fleeing that wave of diarrhea. Bzz. Bzz. The sound came again from the darkness. What was that? I heard it a minute ago, said Pickpocket. He reached out a hand and searched until he found Houdini. Hey! That's my eye you're poking! Quit it! Said Houdini. I'm not sure what it is. It sounds familiar, though. Hey! Where'd you put the rest of the matches? Uh-oh, Pickpocket thought. He remembered still having the match pack in his hands when they were running. But had he dropped it? Pick felt around for a minute until his tail brushed something. Yes! The matches were there. Pickpocket held it up triumphantly in the dark. Here! I got it! Great! Is it wet? I sure am, said Houdini, wringing out his tail. Pickpocket flipped up the flap and lit a match. The match fizzed to life. It did smoke a bit, but held the sparking flame. Just a little damp. Bzzz, bzzz. The sound in the tunnel outside was closer than before. Houdini held fingers to his lips, and Pickpocket nodded silently. Retrieving the pushpin from the dirt, Houdini held it ready and peered into the tunnel. Nothing was there. No beast they knew of made odd buzzing sounds, so they decided not to worry. It was probably a sound from a gust of wind blowing some trash or something. Houdini and Pickpocket waded out into the tunnel. You wouldn't have ever guessed the torrent that had passed through a moment ago. Our Hannah will find the empty tank soon if we don't get back, you know, said Houdini quietly, turning to look behind him at Pick. Even if we did find it, it would probably be ruined. Pickpocket nodded sullenly. Soon enough, they had a much more troubling problem. They were lost. Every tunnel they entered looked and smelled exactly the same, only different twists and turns. Nothing looked familiar, and Pickpocket and Houdini feared they would never get out. They were wading through a particularly slummy tunnel when they heard an odd noise again from right behind them. Bzzz, bzzz. Ah! Pickpocket screamed and whirled. Houdini turned with pushpin raised, ready to plunge it into whatever foul plumbing monster lurked behind them. The strangest creature Pickpocket or Houdini had ever seen treaded the water behind them. Its little black body was the size of Pick's head, and its eyes were two violet globes gleaming with a million facets, and Pickpocket reflected back in every one of them. It smiled widely. Oddly, a pair of translucent stubs buzzed on its back as if it was beating invisible wings. "What in the world are you?" asked Pickpocket. The creature bowed its head graciously to Pickpocket, then Houdini, as if not noticing the wicked point of the pushpin in his hands, poised to strike. In its tiny voice, it buzzed. "Pleased to meet you. I am Ginger Niblets." "You are a fly. A wingless fly," said Houdini, lowering his pushpin in astonishment. Pickpocket stuck out his tongue and looked revolted. "A fly? Yuck! Flies taste disgusting. Not that you're disgusting, Ginger Niblets. You just taste nasty. Ooh." Pickpocket hurriedly added. He did not want to be rude. Ginger Niblets seemed very nice, and he did not want to hurt her feelings. "So you don't eat flies? I would imagine we are quite salty," Ginger Niblet said, just a little nervously. Houdini imagined she must be quite frightened. After all, she was facing two salamanders without wings to escape. "Never eat 'em. They give me gas," said Pickpocket firmly. Why don't you have wings, Ginger Niblets?" asked Houdini. Ginger Niblet's face turned sour and her stubs buzzed faster. "It was that really tall human, the one that loves to dissect bugs and throws them in the toilet bowl. He pinched my wings off and then he crushed me. I've lived down here ever since. When I heard you, I thought maybe you could help me out of the plumbing. I know the way out. As you can see, I can't fly anymore." "Yes, the Big John Mark. He is our Big Hannah's big brother, and he can be quite nasty when he wants to," said Pickpocket. However, Houdini was thinking of something else entirely. After a moment of thought, he said, "Ginger Niblets, you know where we can get out? At the plumbing of the kitchen sink?" "Yes. I've been down here for a month or so. I know these tunnels better than any other fly." "Well, we could carry you if you show us the way out. It would be easy," said Houdini, smiling. Ginger Niblets beamed. "That would be so wonderful. Is terrible being stuck down here with all the scum and the slugs. The only thing I eat here is gunk that watches off their plates. Is terrible, really." Pickpocket held up the match and bravely said, "Show us the way, Ginger Niblets!" What might have taken Pickpocket and Houdini forever to find the sink drain took Ginger Niblets only a few moments. The sink drain trek was hard going because Houdini and Pickpocket had to push Ginger Niblets when her legs grew tired. Sometimes they said a few words. Mostly, though, they waited in silence. Finally, they reached the vertical pipe and their dental floss. "Bigs can be oblivious," said Houdini. "You'd think they would have noticed a cord of dental floss hanging from the faucet." Houdini, Pickpocket, and Ginger Niblets ascended the same way they had come down, Houdini slithering up the rope with Pickpocket on his back. This time, however, Pickpocket carefully held Ginger Niblet's small, wingless body in his hands. The going was much easier because Houdini did not have to watch his feet. Instead, he just swirled up like a funky vertical roller coaster. Standing in the light of day had never felt better, and the rain outside now seemed the most desirable weather. Ginger Niblets was especially happy after being trapped down under the ground for so long. There was the whole matter of sneaking out of the kitchen with the Bigs in the house, but Houdini, Pickpocket, and Ginger Niblets were careful, and the Bigs never saw a thing. Pickpocket, Houdini, and Ginger Niblets flopped into the salamander tank. It had been a wild day, and they were exhausted. Ginger Niblets loved their cozy, warm tank, and Pickpocket and Houdini kindly offered to let her stay there. Ginger Niblets accepted happily. She had never been offered a home before, and she thought Pickpocket and Houdini were very nice salamanders. Even the salamander food was to her liking. Right as they had all settled down in the tank, Houdini, closing his eyes, ready for a nap, their Hannah came into the room. She took off her wet raincoat with the big pockets. She sometimes let Pickpocket and Houdini ride in them, and then sidled over to the tank. "Did you have a nice time while I was away?" "Aw, you found a friend." Hannah leaned closer, smiling at Ginger Niblets, and tapped a finger on the glass. Much to Pickpocket's delight, from her pocket, Hannah pulled a handful of golden crackers and laid them in the salamander's food dish. "I guess you had a busy day." As Pickpocket chewed happily on his cracker, Houdini and Pickpocket gave each other a knowing look. Their Hannah had no idea. The end. Now, I wanted to share this story with you, number one, because it was written by a student just like you, a homeschool student that was in one of my classes. She was in middle school when she wrote it. And it's not a perfect story, but it's a really good story. It's a fun story, and it's great to examine what it is that we like about stories, what makes them great, what makes us want to find out what happens next. So I have some questions that I want you to answer about this particular story, Houdini and Pickpocket, that are going to be inside of our Slack space for intro. And then there's going to be another story that you get to listen to for homework this week. This story, I think I can find a YouTube clip on the internet, so it won't be me reading it to you. But this story is unfinished, and part of your work this week is to figure out what you think the ending to the story should be. So you get to finish somebody else's story. I really do miss seeing you guys, and I'm really glad that I'll be able to see you next week. But for now, pay close attention to the instructions for what you need to do in Slack, and then you will also see your homework for week 6, which is this week coming up, in Slack as well. If you have more paragraphs written for your story and you're ready for a tutor time, contact me and we will get that set up I will be happy to Zoom with you if you have any questions or problems or concerns, and I will see you all really soon. Bye.